This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to What the Health, an independent approach to your health span. Have you noticed how our healthcare system may not have your best interest in mind? Join Dr. Eckel in this fun and sometimes disturbing exploration of the state of healthcare and what it means for you. Now, here's your host, Dr. Eckel.
Welcome back, everybody. I am Dr. Greg Eckel, and this is What the Health. And I have a special treat for you today, live from Kenya. We've got Dr. Ameet Aggarwal, and we are talking about emotional release and trauma healing, a component that is underlying so much dis-ease in our world today. I want to give you a little bio of Dr. Ameet. With more than 15 years helping people like you get to the root cause of physical and emotional turmoil. He understands how challenging and complicated it can seem. He's a naturopathic doctor, a psychotherapist, a homeopath. He specializes with family constellation work, best-selling author of Heal Your Body, Cure Your Mind, and voted one of the top 43 therapists worldwide. Dr. Ameet, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Greg. It's great to be back on the show, and I love your energy, so thank you.
Indeed. You are so welcome. So this topic, it often goes overlooked in a Western approach to medicine because it's dealing with the mind and the emotions. And, I'm curious how you arrived at really having that focus and that understanding of wanting to address at this level for healing.
Okay, Greg. So I notice a lot of people struggle with physical symptoms that are a result of emotional trauma. Yeah. And sometimes we blame leaky gut or food sensitivities, which are all a factor, of course, in chronic disease and inflammation. But sometimes that vulnerability towards leaky gut, towards liver toxicity and adrenal fatigue is actually coming from unresolved trauma. Yeah. Trauma could be seeing your parents fighting, feeling abandoned, unloved, untouched. Yeah. Like there's no physical touch from your mom, for example, creates a starvation feeling and a self-deprivation. And all these responses that you have to trauma in your childhood, so these traumas in childhood are often known as adverse childhood experiences, or even these responses you have to trauma in your adulthood, they're a nervous response. And the nervous response creates a physiological change in your body. Yeah. So when you have a stress response in your body, you stimulate your adrenal glands to produce adrenaline, right? And what happens is with constant trauma or unresolved trauma, your nervous system is primed to be in a certain alert state all the time. And that uses up nutrients, number one. Number two, instead of your adrenal glands producing your hormones in a nice circadian rhythm, especially cortisol, which should go up and down during the day, your nervous system and your adrenal glands are releasing cortisol in constant amounts. And this creates a cortisol imbalance. And this cortisol imbalance then affects insulin sensitivity, blood sugar regulation, right? It suppresses your brain chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, melatonin, and GABA, leading to anxiety, depression, insomnia, OCD symptoms. The cortisol levels, when they're imbalanced, they also suppress your thyroid hormones. And when your thyroid hormone T3 is very low, or your T4 is not converting to T3 very well, what happens is all your cells in the body stop working well. Yeah. So what happens in your gut? All those cells in your gut lining that are keeping a good barrier, these cells do not stick well together. These junctions become weak. So you become more prone to leaky gut syndrome, which means more toxins go into your bloodstream, causing more inflammation and more chronic disease, including brain degeneration. The other thing is that your thyroid hormone is super important for your liver to function well. And we all know that your liver controls almost every function in your body, from detoxification, enzyme activation, immune cell activation. Since we're in COVID times right now, it's really important to understand that a key part of keeping your immune system strong is making sure that your liver is working well. Your liver controls hormonal imbalances or balances, estrogen, progesterone levels, everything. Yeah. So now, if your thyroid hormones are low, then your liver is not going to work well. You'll detoxify less. So you'll have less bile flow. With less bile flow, then you have poorer digestion, more gas, bloating, constipation as well. So most people make a mistake of taking laxatives for constipation, but it's a liver issue, right? And if your bile is not flowing well, then all the good juices are not going into your intestines. So your microbiome, the environment in your gut, will become unhealthy. So all those good bacteria that you're trying to populate in your gut will not proliferate as well because you don't have the right bile salts and the right juices flowing into your intestines. So it's an uphill battle, right? So how is this? So we've come from trauma all the way to your liver, right? Through cortisol imbalance. So just to recap, it's important to always heal your liver when you're working with leaky gut syndrome, not only taking probiotics to make sure that the environment is good and you're detoxifying well, but at the same time, instead of only taking supplements, it's super important to also resolve trauma, which is stressing your adrenal glands, driving up your cortisol levels, and messing up your thyroid hormones, and therefore messing up all the cells in your body, including your mitochondria, which we'll go into later.
So I can hear some people asking the question, well, how do I know that it's trauma? Like I had a fine childhood, right? How would it be? How would trauma, like, how would I know if trauma is actually underlying my health condition?
Right. Good question. So sometimes it's not trauma. I have to say that, right? It's a physiological response. It's a food sensitivity. It's just bad lifestyle. Mm-hmm. I go through each person's history from childhood to adulthood. And when they're speaking, I sense an energetic shift where there's a blockage, an energy block. And many therapists are trained to do this. So you can pick up on where there is some sort of hurt or absence of soul or abandonment or just a sense of disconnection in a person when they're talking about a subject. And you know that something went missing there. That's number one. Number two, we can see, okay, when did your symptoms start? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we look at, was there an event before that? Even though you don't think it's traumatic, maybe mom went for a holiday and didn't show up for a week. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you thought it was fine, but part of you felt alone or you're left with your grandparents. That abandonment could have affected you as well. Or you think, that was my parents fighting, but, I don't care about them kind of thing. But internally you have this certain resentment or hurt. Or you feel, okay, dad left mom, but it was good for her. Yes, you feel good for mom, so you feel healthy. That's not a trauma. Strangely, though, you have a subtle loyalty towards mom against dad, maybe. Mm-hmm. And so part of your loyalty is actually against a person who gave you life. That's your life force. So suddenly a part of your energy is against what the source of life, which is your father as well. Yeah. I often see liver issues stemming from that, strangely enough, and right-sided issues. Yeah. Or dysfunctional relationships in your life. So that often happens. So it's important to look at these things. And we'll talk about family constellation therapy as well very shortly, how ancestral trauma and your parents' trauma and your family trauma are also affecting you, even though you might not know it.
Sure. Yeah. So, are there ways to tune in? Are there clues for people that are watching or listening to think like, well, maybe I should get a little curious about this? Never had the discussion around non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or diabetes or heart disease as having this underlying trauma component. I think we can see clearly on the heart disease front, right, with all of the medications and interventions that have been developed in the Western world, it's still the number one killer. So clearly, most heart attacks in North America happen on Monday mornings. There's a big energetic component to the heart as the emperor in Chinese medicine. So, I can make that tie in for people here. I'm wondering if you've got some other clues or some symptoms that people may want to tune into, or maybe it's a thought pattern or process. Because a lot of times this is so unconscious and buried so deep that there's no awareness to it.
Yeah. So you hit the nail on the head by saying it's unconscious. Yeah. And it also depends on the stress response. So why do people have a heightened stress response on a Monday? Mm-hmm. Yes, it might be work, but some people are more prone to a higher stress response because of the adverse childhood experiences that have primed their nervous system to hyper respond to everyday life stress. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they're more vulnerable to that cortisol imbalance, to that inflammation, to that breakdown and degeneration of their entire body. Okay. Yeah. So what I do with my clients is, well, I have a couple of exercises I do, but one of them is just mindfulness and understanding, okay, this is a stress response. Then we go into our head and analyze. I try and get people to stay away from analysis and stay with the body and go towards vulnerability. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because we hate vulnerability as human beings, and yet it's the place where we feel the most truth with ourselves as well as with other people. But there's not enough support in society to teach us how to become more vulnerable. Yeah.
It's very scary, actually.
It's very scary. It's very scary for a couple of things. There's an overwhelming feeling, one. But the funny thing is, part of the scariness is actually because of the labels given to those feelings we have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the labels might say, oh, you're too weak, or you're not strong enough, or you shouldn't feel this way. So there's a lot of shame around those feelings that are not our original shame. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This shame is coming from the label and stigma society puts. So if you can bypass that and really give yourself permission, to be weak, to be sensitive, to be alone. So there's an exercise I do with clients or in group work as well sometimes. It's called the permission to heal exercise. So if you close your eyes, take a deep breath in and out, and just feel your feelings for a moment. And you allow these sentences, you just repeat these sentences. It's safe for me to be confused.
It's safe for me to be confused. Yeah, I'll do it. We're going to do it right now.
Yeah, we're going to do it right now.
Good.
It's safe for me to be confused from time to time.
It's safe for me to be confused from time to time.
And the important part of the sentence is actually the words from time to time or once in a while. Okay? Because that releases our resistance to those feelings. And it doesn't force us to feel better. Because our body doesn't want to feel better, be forced to feel better either. We go into natural resistance. So the words from time to time allow us both spectrums of our experience. Now we'll go to the next word. So I choose different emotions that I pick up in the air energetically.
Okay.
It's safe to be lost once in a while.
It's safe to be lost once in a while.
It's safe to want help from time to time.
It's safe to want help from time to time.
It's safe to find peace once in a while.
It's safe to find peace once in a while.
It's safe to be angry with someone like my mother or a friend from time to time.
It's safe to be angry once in a while like my mother or a friend from time to time.
What I meant to say was it's safe to be angry with someone like my mother. Or it's safe to be angry with my mother from time to time. For example, you can replace the mother with anyone else.
Sure.
It's safe to resist their influence from time to time.
It's safe to resist their influence from time to time.
It's safe to be scared once in a while.
It's safe to be scared once in a while.
See, so anger is actually a way of resisting people. And when we resist people, we're afraid of being alone. So that's why I tie those sentences together sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because when we resist, there's a feeling of leaving the group or not belonging anymore. And giving yourself permission to feel fear as well as anger and resistance from time to time gives you a journey into all spectrums of your feelings. And then your nervous system gets used to that. And you have less shoulds about how to be, less stigmas upon yourself that come from upbringing. And you do this exercise often enough. And in my book, I've given the more detailed sentences, also in the online course. Then the nervous system relaxes. You're less against yourself or your natural inclinations to emote. That forgiveness, that allowance within, somehow releases energetic blocks and allows you to regain energy from spirit, from the universe, from wherever you call it, because you're fighting against yourself less and fighting against your innate nature and your innocence less. By doing that, then what happens is your adrenal glands start calming down over time. You go into less of a stress response. And you'll become aware of that. It's like, oh gosh, I'm being stimulated into stress response. And I was used to resisting it, which gives me more stress. So it's like, okay, I can feel vulnerable from time to time. Then I can also receive and see this person clearly and see, okay, this boss is actually not the father who abused me when I was a child. Mm-hmm. Just a normal balding man or somebody who's actually using aggression to get his way, but he cannot touch my physical body because I'm grown up now. Mm-hmm. You get a different realization or different paradigm shift, really. And that gives your nervous system a break from its continuous cycle that it is trapped in. I know that didn't fully answer your question on how to help people feel if they're traumatized or not. Yet this exercise does release them from unconscious traumas as well.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that. And that's a great one for folks to kind of go back through and even, kind of walk through that one again and again in a meditative or mindfulness component so that, just to play with it and experience it, because I think there's enough space there and really hit some major themes for being on the planet. So it's a really great exercise. And it is, even just repeating the words, you get kind of a lighter sense of yourself of like, oh, I'm just going to, from time to time, it's very innocent. It's not committed forever or always, it's just from time to time, it's a really nice addition. Yeah.
And mix the sentences. You can use quote unquote, what we call negative feelings or stressful feelings like dark feelings, depressed, anxious, etc. And also it's safe to smile once in a while, safe to laugh sometimes. Mm-hmm. See, which is very different from affirmations. Affirmations like, okay, I'm happy. And part of you is like, gosh, I'm not doing it well enough because I'm not there yet. And there's a stress response. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Just like, from time to time, it's safe. It's like, okay, maybe. Yeah. And I can go as well. There's no pressure.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, so on that, it is this emotional release and trauma healing is the title of our talk today. And, looking at other, you alluded to your book, which I'm going to have the links for that in the show notes. So we'll have where people can connect up. So if that resonated with you, you're listening, please download his book. You're supporting a great doctor and great cause. And it is really can help you heal on very deep levels. So we've got your book there because you go into much more details there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
A lot.
And with what other components? So we also talked about there's these adverse childhood, the ACE scores. And we know pretty much globally, you're born onto the planet, you're going to have some adverse childhood traumas. Like that's just part of being here. It's part of the curriculum of what we're learning, why we incarnated as one way, why I think, the universe happens for us, not to us. And so looking at it that way, what other pieces you had talked about, some family lineage, trainings and teachings that you're doing and finding some really robust results for folks. And then also on the ancestral component, like what's the tie-in there? Because that could also be very helpful for folks understanding that, you know, their symptom picture today might not just be theirs, but it could have been their great grandmother had some major stress or trauma that changed the epigenetic expression of the lineage to today, and now they're experiencing those symptoms. So this was one of the harder concepts. It's really made my job as provider physician much harder to realize, like, one, a lot of people don't know their lineage, but two, a lot now with the genetic testing, we're getting some of that data and seeing, okay, where are we from? Where did my ancestors, where did they come from? So this is a really exciting topic, because it really does start to get into more of that oneness or a unified field discussion of health, because it links us in time, because we're not just a standalone, like, I'm just here now, right? We're all linked. Yeah,
absolutely. So we inherit ancestral trauma and what we call generational trauma. I practice a therapy called family constellations therapy, and it's an exploding therapy all over Europe and around the world now, because it's really looking at the root cause of people's dis-ease. And so in family constellations, we see that we as people are loyal, to events that happen in our lineage. That loyalty comes out of a sense of love and wanting to care for or carry the burdens of our ancestors, of where we're coming from. Yeah, because if we carry the burdens, it's a way of belonging and sharing the trauma. And that loyalty sometimes brings about dis-ease in a person, because it's too much of a burden to carry things for your ancestors. And in family constellations therapy, we actually encourage people to respectfully leave the traumas with the ancestors, leave the burden with a grandparent. So that because that also, in a way, when you respectfully look at a grandparent as very strong and able to, endure in life, even though they collapsed or they suffered, they went through an endurance. So when we can bow down to respect to them with that, just acknowledging their endurance without thinking, oh gosh, I have to rescue, I have to feel bad for you, etc. That respect empowers and frees your ancestor and gives you permission to be the child of the lineage rather than a warrior. Yeah, warrior with an O.
Oh, with an O.
Yeah, because a warrior is good, because then you can face your ancestors and give them permission to be strong and to suffer and respect their fate. But if you entangle yourself with their burden, then you project weakness on your lineage and you get busy with stuff that will entangle you in more dark energy and more depression and more stress. Okay, so there's ways of giving this back. Another example, what we do in family constellations therapy is acknowledging missing people. So a lot of people believe or don't acknowledge miscarried or aborted children in their family. And in constellation therapy, often I see is that when we acknowledge a missing child, so let's say my mom had a miscarriage before me and I thought I was the first child. And then I will strangely, when I acknowledge the child before me, that miscarried child, I will suddenly feel in the right place in my family system. I'll be like, okay, gosh, I belong in the second position actually. And this feels more right. If I don't acknowledge that child before me, I will feel out of place. And that out of place might manifest as a sense of urgency or chronic stress or feeling like I'm not doing enough. And I keep on having to outperform myself. Yeah, that's because I'm trying to take the place of a first child where I don't belong. We see that very often, very often. Other things are being loyal to one parent rather than the other. Yeah, dad went away, left mom. So now I'm mom's like partner almost. So it's like an emotional lover, replacing the father. So in a way, I don't experience my childhood as innocently. I'm busy with mom, taking care of mom's affairs in a way. Two things are happening here. One, I'm so preoccupied, I'm not available to love or a relationship with another person energetically. Number two, I'm denying my lineage from my father. Yeah, out of resentment towards him, out of society's label against what he did. So in a way, I'm swallowing society's label, and I'm also swallowing mom's resentment or pain around father. And I'm ignoring a source of life that comes to me from somebody else. So when I can say to mom, I respectfully leave this with you. I love you very much. I'm your son. I'm your daughter. And look at dad and say, you know what? Or look at mom and say, look, your pain with dad is between the two of you. And I was born of both of you. And I need to bow down and say that my life came from both of you. And I cannot carry your anger and your pain and disappointment, no matter what happened. Yeah, because you two were the adults before I was born. Yeah. And I need to feel my soul energy, who I am to both of you, before I can take on your pain, mom. And when you can connect to your soul energy, who you are, before you take on that pain, you get information and a source of life that you haven't tasted for a long time. And that gives you strength. It improves your immune system. It releases a lot of dysfunctional physiological processes in your body. I see it all the time, including symptoms like, heartburn going away, eczema going away, constipation going away. All sorts of things disappear when we resolve emotional entanglements with our family members.
With on the family constellation work, I'm a big fan of it as well. Recently, I had a patient come back, kind of referred her out, and she said, doc, thank you for that referral, but it was too woo-woo.
Yes.
And so what, because it's not a well-known therapeutic intervention as of yet. I mean, it's growing and it's much bigger in Europe, right? It originated in Europe, based off of some work in Africa, actually. And so how would you explain it, like, to folks? Like, what actually does it look like? What does a family constellation therapy session look like?
Okay. Let's go to the science first behind certain things.
Perfect.
If your grandmother was experiencing trauma, whether it's in the war, the Holocaust, or wherever, her cortisol levels will change. Her physiology will change. And that will influence the eggs in her ovary. So automatically your mom's genetics have shifted. And they see this all the time. It's called epigenetics. Our genetics change based on trauma from the environment. So now, because your mom's genetics have changed, that means your genetics as well, because you're going to be born off your mom later on in life, will have been altered because of what your grandmother experienced. So genetically, they've proved that generational trauma passes down through generations. You see that they've measured that. What does family constellations therapy look like? So I do a lot of it online. So I'll pick up things energetically, and I'll get you to say certain sentences to certain family members. I'll also have objects that I work with, that help me tune in to different family members or issues in your life. You can also meet in groups, and this is the more common way of doing family constellations therapy, is where you will actually I as a therapist will have people to help me, and you will pick different people to represent different family members or even your issue. And you will put your hands on a person. This is where the woo starts, right? And it's really weird, but it's unbelievably powerful. You'll put your hand on one person and say, okay, you're my mother. Then I will place or ask the mother representative to walk somewhere in the room and place herself. I'll observe what the mother is doing. And the funny thing is, this person will actually pick up on the energy of your mom. And this is very hard to swallow, but you got to see it to believe it. Then I'll ask you, okay, now bring in somebody for your issue. Depression. That person will represent your depression. I'll watch that representative. I'll bring in somebody for your father, etc. And it goes on. Then I'll watch how these people are interacting. These representatives are interacting in this circle that you've created of your life. Your mom might be looking at the floor, completely fixated. Your dad might be looking away, out of the circle. Usually if somebody's fixated on the floor looking at something, it's usually a dead person. Usually an aborted child, a miscarried child, an early death, or a dead parent. And if somebody's looking outside of the circle, it could be they're longing for their dead mother, or they're missing country. You know, they migrated from a country and they're longing for a country. Yeah. Or there was an early death of a parent and they're connecting with the dead on the other side, for example. Mm-hmm. So there's already a disconnect between mother and father. They're estranged. And so it'll be like, okay, that's the reason why maybe they broke up or they didn't feel as close, because both of them were looking elsewhere. And maybe the miscarried child was such a big grief for the mom, and the dad couldn't look at it either. So in a way, they couldn't look at this dead child together. So they started separating. And when you get those two parents to kind of come together and really say, look, you lost a child and I lost a child. We both lost someone we loved. Reestablishment of connection energetically. Yeah. Acknowledging the grief together brings people closer together. And that can heal a wounded relationship. And then I, as the child or the client, when I see, okay, my parents now are a bit together, I feel a sense of peace, less stress. I don't have to work so hard in fixing dad's problems or rescuing mom anymore. Yeah. I'm more settled within myself. When I'm more settled, my biology is going to change. I will feel happier in relationships. I'll be able to give more to my partner because I'm more available to my life rather than my parents' trauma. Mm. Yeah. So we resolve these with healing sentences and just movements.
And that, so just to get the picture of it too, because you're talking, that's the individual in the session, there's surrogates, representative. So this could happen, not just a child in the room. It could be a 60-year-old person in the room, and healing. The thing that I find just so fascinating about it is that one individual on the whole family tree doing this work can actually heal traumas on the whole family tree, forward and backward through time. And, that gets esoteric, right? And I think that's why this patient came back and said, that's very woo-woo, but the proof is in the results that it shows. And there's profound change that occurs with this.
Huge change. And the beauty of this is that over time, then people need less therapy and less supplements and less medications. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you've disentangled them from the source cause, the root cause. And as naturopaths, we're always trying to treat the root cause. Yeah. What therapists are finding is that ancestral entanglements are really a big root cause in many people's lives. Mm.
And it has really made that sentence right there is like, wow, there's a lot more happening in a clinical encounter with one person sitting in front of you. And this goes to just everybody, walking on the streets as well. We don't really know what that person's story is. And so always my default is let's more loving kindness. It's like, because we just don't know what is happening there. And so it does, you've got my mind going all over the place here on, okay, well, what do I want to ask Dr. Ameet right now? Really around that component. So the family constellation, how do you bring that in? Because you're doing some just amazing work with kids, and globally online, you're accessible. What kind of results are you seeing? Can you have any stories that come to mind around that type of work and what you've seen occur?
Yeah. Okay. So I combine a lot of homeopathy in my work. Yeah.
Yes.
And I need to mention, if anyone's interested in homeopathic remedies for trauma, they're all in the online course. I've put them there, and you'll put the link there. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes.
But the results I've seen are phenomenal, right? I had a person with, I think, 20 years of heartburn and ulcers, stomach ulcers. And it came because he had a strange argument with his wife 20 years ago. And he'd taken homeopathic remedies. He'd done diet changes. He'd been, of course, on the whole normal Western medical model as well. Results would, he would find relief and it would come back, find relief and come back. And so in a session, I asked the typical question, when did this begin? What happened the year before? What happened around that time? And he says, well, I had this argument. And then immediately I could feel the energy in the room change, right? And so we did a couple of things. One is he was very polite with his wife, which is not a bad way to be, but he suppressed a lot of his anger and emotions out of respect for the culture, his parents, etc. And he was suffering though. Yeah, so that repressed emotion was giving him this pain inside. And so I got him to respectfully really give back the pain, yeah, and express some anger as well, yeah, by either hitting a mattress. I'm not saying you have to hit people, and definitely not, but hitting a mattress, just feeling that he's allowed to feel some anger without harming somebody. And then also respectfully telling his father, you know what, I understand the culture in our family. And with all respect, I need to feel this anger and my disappointment with and betrayal with this person and not feel loyal to them anymore without disrespecting you as my parents. Whew, he got a huge sense of freedom. Yeah. Immediately then we started seeing results. Yeah. Less pain, and start diminishing. On top of that, I also gave him homeopathic Ignatia. Ignatia is a good homeopathic remedy for trauma as well, feeling betrayed and really forsaken. Yeah. Combination of that and homeopathy, results were fantastic. That's one. There's so many other different things. I've actually had people have a baby after a family constellations session combined with naturopathic medicine, of course, but the missing piece was this entanglement where their partner was actually still involved with an ex. So their soul kind of knew that there was an issue here, right? And when we worked on that involvement and let go of that entanglement that the partner had, so I got the partner involved and also got her to have the strength to say, you know what, I will not put up with this anymore. I need respect in my own domain. And I need to feel safe in order to bring this child into this world. You know, those healing centers and her meeting her own needs emotionally and energetically. Physiology changes, she could retain a pregnancy.
Wow. So they were having a really hard time conceiving. And then after that change they were able to conceive.
Yeah. Carry a child.
Yeah.
So there's a lot.
My bad joke about that, Dr. Ameet, is you would not want a bumper sticker saying, come see Dr. Ameet, he'll get you pregnant.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, because I mean, some people didn't know they would get pregnant, right? Some people got pregnant by mistake just because they got healthier, right? And released entanglement. They weren't even planning to. There's other people I've worked, you know, who have had ancestors who were in the Holocaust, for example, right? And there's a lot of emotional pain that's passed on from generations on that. A lot of guilt, a lot of, you know, some people, they don't want to eat or feed themselves anymore out of loyalty to those who starved in the camps, for example. And they don't know that's the cause of their sense of self-deprivation and guilt, chronic guilt. So there's a lot of changes that are possible with family constellation. So I encourage everyone to really look into this work.
I love that.
Just experiment with it.
Yeah. And you gave us some really great techniques on kind of opening that door and having the curiosity. I think it's really important to have the curiosity rather than oh, no, that's not for me. Because if you're having that response, it might actually be very good for you, right? You might be having some resistance to it because you just don't know what's underlying that. And I think it is time that we open these doors up and just look underneath the rug and see, well, is there something there? It doesn't mean everybody has that. The other thing that I want to bring up is around just the word trauma, right? It's a loaded term. And when we look at that, we have a tendency to compare ours to others and maybe minimize, for instance, I heard talking with some friends and they're like, hey, it can be traumatic for a child, goes to sleep and then their mom isn't there when they wake up. That could register on our nervous system as a trauma. Now that is not growing up in the Holocaust or in a concentration camp. And so that continuum, it's not a comparison at all, but I think we tend to minimize oh, I didn't have any adverse childhood traumas or, nothing really happened in my lineage. So trauma tends to get, one, it's gaining a lot more acknowledgement now worldwide of being an underlying cause. And it's also a loaded term for so many people. Wonder if you wanted to speak into that.
I would love to. I would love to, Greg, because, you know, trauma is often associated with either abuse, rape, you know, accidents, like really harsh experiences. And I think maybe that's why they came up with this term adverse childhood experiences.
Yes.
Because it's a more digestible, I don't know what to call it, term, concept. And so it's more approachable. So you can actually allow yourself and acknowledge in yourself that you have had an adverse childhood experience without calling it trauma. The thing is, both affect your nervous system, both affect your physiology. Yeah, both create abandonment issues, stress issues, you know, self-esteem issues. And when you can bridge adverse childhood experiences to the word trauma and not make trauma as extreme, then you recognize that both are stressful to any baby, any child, any adult. Yeah. And really being gentle and patient with yourself, and also having enough integrity to say, hey, you know what? That really did stress me out. I don't need to minimize it. I want to look at this. I want to look at this and support my body and my psyche and my soul through the emotional journey of healing this wound. Yeah. So some people are afraid of looking too weak if they're addressing a wound that seems too small compared to what other people in society have addressed. But the longer you ignore this small wound, it festers. It festers and creates problems in your life. You get into unsatisfying relationships. Yeah. Or you're angry with a person all the time. Yeah. Or you have a drinking problem, or you get ulcers or headaches. Yeah. So I think really be loving and gentle with yourself and soft with yourself without the fear of the stigma around being soft with yourself. Because the world is changing. We're going into a more feminine cycle. That's a lot about nurturing and nourishment, and care. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, naturopathic medicine is about nurturing the immune system, the microbiome, the gut, healing things rather than harshly killing things in your body. So do the same thing with your mind and your heart and your sense of well-being. Yeah.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah. The that component of the nurturance and the kind of that pendulum going back into feminine, I think, you know, we are seeing that old system kind of crumble. It's not going gently into that dark night. And so we're in this really a turbulent time where, you know, this transition is occurring. And it is that aspect, like I'm encouraging folks to, you know, really get into service through joy. We had a little conversation beforehand of getting on the air. And it really, I'm seeing this over and over and over again with patients that come in and in community. You know, we've got a lot of fractionation happening, and that loving kindness and that nurturance is really necessary, that we need to allow ourselves it first so that we can have enough that just kind of bubbles over out of us. And, you know, tying into that abundance of the energy. I mean, the planet really is here to support us, and it is bountiful. And for some reason we've become isolated and separated, and you know, really we can focus in on the trauma or the adverse childhood experiences, or like you had mentioned in the exercise that you shared with us, of be sure to put in, you can experience joy from time to time. You know, I can experience connection from time to time. I can experience love from time to time, because these are the things that you're feeling. If you're feeling isolated or separated or depressed, I mean, we're seeing depression and anxiety go through the roof right now, where, you know, we've been told to isolate. And, you know, I really wish they would have called that just socially distancing. rather than social isolation. You know, it's
yeah, words are powerful. Words are
Yeah.
powerful. They affect our thinking, you know, and
Yeah.
they affect our experience. You choose one word or the other, you're going to have a different experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other
And
facets of this conversation that you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
so intuitively, I'm drawn to mention that A Course in Miracles. I'm studying A Course in Miracles, and it's a beautiful journey. It's a very spiritual book. At the same time, it's a very transformational book, and it teaches about inner peace and letting go of nomenclature or narrative that comes from common consciousness and going really within. And my personal experience with it is that a lot of stress and trauma has released from me just by acknowledging that, you know, certain information is just not true out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All the language we use in our mind, how we label ourselves, our interpretation of events and everything really comes from a collective interpretation of life. And that is contributing to some people's stress. So I invite you to also look at the words you're using in your mind, with yourself, in life, and understand, are these words giving you stress in your body, or do they give you the sense of elation and freedom? And practice that. Even when you're speaking to yourself, are you using derogatory words, or are you giving yourself permission to say, you know what, it's safe to wait a bit before I make a decision about this issue or about myself? And just creating more and more room for your soul to breathe away from the words that are just bombarding our minds all the time. So, So I hope that's, I just felt intuitively drawn to mention that.
That's great. There is a compendium or a book that goes along that I found very helpful with that. It's called The Disappearance of the Universe. Are you familiar with that?
I'm looking forward to reading. I've never heard of it, but I want it now.
So it's on the Course in Miracles, and it's a really great read. And it helps maybe, you know, for some folks that may have a tough time getting into that Course in Miracles, of looking at it, gives some wraparound information as well. And it is, it's very powerful work. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because our words do matter. You know what, that dialogue that is going on in our minds, and everybody has it. It is, I like to say, it's a dangerous neighborhood to go into by yourself. For some reason, it is hypercritical and, you know, can get into a negative component. So the more that you can rewire for the positive, it is very important. So like, it doesn't mean that you never get into that negative self-talk, but just catch yourself earlier and earlier and say, you know, take a deep breath and let it out. And, you know, because when you are stressed, what happens? You stop breathing, and then you don't have the oxygen, and you're not able to actually access your frontal lobe for executive function and creativity. And that is such a piece that we're seeing. I'm seeing it with patients every day in the clinic around the amount of stress that is carried. And, you know, it is almost like we've put our own selves into a prison, or, you know, it's like the story of, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. You know, it's like we create this golden jail. We know it's known, but we're miserable in it. It's like, well, what are you doing? Like, you have the full on power to step outside, but then it comes back to this concept of vulnerability, of the unknown. I don't know what's out there. Something negative could happen. It's like, well, something positive could happen as well. So it is that creation and participation with our world and our lives. We're not, you know, it just not just happening to you, right? You're not a victim to circumstance or to the universe. You came here for a reason, and the component of your active participation is required to co-create what is happening in this reality. So, you know, it is one of the components that I see, and why I want to have this conversation with you on What the Health is this emotional release and trauma healing, giving people options and opportunities, because those unknown underlying issues or imbalances, the root causes are they're we're blinded to them. And so then we don't see that there is a root, that we're able to actually free ourselves and, free your mind, and then your body will follow. There's songs, there's poetry, there's literature all on this topic. And that component of why I created this platform is really helping people get into their sovereign freedom as unique creators on the planet. Like, really supporting people to get into their creativity, because there's a lot more love when we heal these wounds to free up. The reason why we want you to heal these wounds is to access your creativity, because we are way more powerful than we've been taught. And we haven't even actualized what we're capable of doing. And so that's why I bring in, speakers like Dr. Ameet onto What the Health. And, really gets me fired up. I learned so much in this conversation today. So thank you, Dr. Ameet.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, any last parting words?
Yeah. So what's coming up for me as well is community. So sometimes we feel it's up to us to change and transform. And, we're the creators of our own reality. At the same time, seek out people who resonate at a good vibration, because they awaken your consciousness. Yeah. Because our consciousness awakens sometimes in communication with another, acknowledgement. Yeah. If I can see you recognize something and see that you understand something, my understanding of your understanding gives you permission to flourish. Yeah. So surround yourself with just growing people, like-minded people, safe people. Yeah. And sometimes challenging people, but in a healthy way. Yeah. Create that intention. If you're feeling really lost, just ask, and you don't know what to ask for in guidance. Sometimes you can just say, guide me to the right people in my life so that I can flourish and be nurtured. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. And if people want to understand how the liver, the gut, the mind, the adrenal system all work, then there's some free videos on my website as well. Please check it out. It'll walk you through healing the gut, liver, and the emotional healing exercise is actually in video form on that site as well.
Awesome. And all of those links will be included. Everybody, this is What the Health. If you enjoyed today's show, you got some value out of it, think of 2 loved ones and share this video and let them know why you are sharing, what made you think of them. And also just encouragement, get out there, give us those 5-star reviews, tell people about the show. I've created this platform for you, your loved ones, and the community at large, because this is how change happens. We educate each other from the heart, bring in really great speakers and with their hearts and their information to help you on your journey. This is Contact Talk Radio. We are here Tuesdays, 2 to 3 p.m. Pacific time. We'll see you next week. Thanks for coming on.
Ciao, ciao.